There was a moment, but what I thought I was doing was just writing and entertaining.
Many people consider Alan Alda to be one of the most considerate and giving actors in Hollywood history. He gained not only recognition as a talented actor, but also as a leader who infused everything he touched with wisdom and compassion. He is best remembered for his famous portrayal as Hawkeye Pierce on MASH. However, leadership frequently involves conflict, and kindness does not equate to passivity. Throughout her more than 60-year career, Alda has met many people, co-stars, partners, and even former acquaintances who didn't always share his work ethic, vision, or ideals. This piece isn't popular. Secondhand hearsay and cheap gossip are not the point. It explores why the relationships between the 7 actual people Alda worked with might have been more strained, colder, or just not meant to last. The first partner to go was Wayne Rogers. Together, Wayne Rogers and Alan Alda founded MASH. Hawkeye and Trapper John were 2 sides of the same defiant coin. Their timing, banter, and coordinated disobedience became the show's early season's emotional and humorous center. They became one of television's most adored pairs because of their playful friendship and mutual rejection of military bureaucracy. However, after the 3rd season, Rogers left and never returned. He stated in public that it had to do with character imbalance. According to Rogers, the authors had placed too much emphasis on Alda's Hawkeye. The distribution of screen time gradually shifted in Alda's favor as the episodes progressed. The show swiftly changed from being a dynamic duo to being Hawkeye-centric, with Trapper John frequently reduced to one-liners or reaction shots. That change proved to be infuriating and eventually unsustainable for Rogers, an actor with aspirations and pride in his work. Behind the scenes, conflict is thought to have arisen from Alda's burgeoning star and his increasing power in the writer's room. Alda started directing episodes and was said to have influence over casting choices, screenplay direction, and even the show's tone. According to some reports, Rogers felt marginalized. Alda's voice became louder during the creative process as much as on screen. Did the 2 actors have distinct visions, or was it ego, strategy, or creative divergence? Although Alda later stated that he respected Rogers' choice, fans and coworkers were left wondering what actually transpired as their on-screen connection abruptly disappeared. The comedian who didn't laugh last was McLean Stevenson. Another victim of Masha's early success was McLean Stevenson. He added heart and humor to the show as the endearing but foolish Colonel Henry Blake. He was more than just a comedy relief character. In the midst of the 4077's mayhem, he served as the emotional center. Stevenson turned Henry Blake into a beloved character, whether he was cracking a joke or struggling through a crisis. However, he also became frustrated. Similar to Rogers, Stevenson felt overshadowed, particularly as Alda became a creative force and assumed more responsibilities behind the scenes. Alda's creative impact grew as the show progressed. In addition to being the lead, he was also becoming more and more involved in the writing and directing. Scripts, character arcs, and even the tone of episodes that veered toward darker humor and moral reflection had his fingerprints. Stevenson, who wanted to be more than a backup, started to feel excluded. He considered himself as more than just a supporting player and had joined MASH to show off his versatility. He didn't want to remain confined, despite being adored in his profession. He requested to be written off the program after season 3. One of the most startling deaths on television in the 1970s was the outcome. An otherwise light episode ended with a gut punch when Colonel Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan after he had been honorably discharged, a daring narrative choice. The audience was in a state of shock. The tone and narrative of the show changed as a result. Even though Alda helped write the story, he insisted that no one was pressured and that Stevenson left of his own volition. Nonetheless, a lot of people noticed that the creative dynamic was changing, with Alda taking center stage and others fading away. Gary Berghoff, the irritable genius. Gary Berghoff portrayed Radar O'Reilly with sensitivity and skill. With his childlike naivete and remarkable capacity to foresee orders before they were given, the character grew to represent Masha's innermost feelings. Radar won over admirers and gave the show its serene core with his gentle charm and emotional intelligence, which brought equilibrium to the 4077's frequently turbulent environment. He served as the link that connected the humanity and the ridiculousness of life throughout the conflict. However, things weren't always that easy off camera. Later, several cast members spoke of Berghoff's sensitivity and mood swings, which made working with him difficult at times. During production, he was prone to emotional withdrawal. His responses to criticism, even small criticism, could be erratic and severe. Some blamed this on the demands of celebrity, while others thought Berghoff just had trouble handling the emotional strain and stress of being in a well-known group. Berghoff's burden was increased by the demanding schedule of the show and the fact that Radar appeared in almost every episode. Although his actions were never malevolent, they started to strain the patience of both the crew and the actors as tensions increased. Berghoff was said to have had emotional outbursts and to have isolated himself on certain days in between scenes. Although his aptitude was unquestioned, his instability became a persistent worry. Some claim that he felt typecast, stuck in the role, and unable to develop. Others believed that he brought burdens from his personal life to work. The relationship behind the scenes became increasingly tense over time, regardless of the cause. He was never openly attacked by Alda. However, he later admitted that Berghoff's behavior on set was influenced by the amount of personal pressure he was under. He presented it sympathetically, highlighting Berghoff's skill and enduring impact on the program. Although they had great chemistry on film, the real world behind the scenes was far more nuanced. Duvall Robert, two universes in one movie. MASH was a movie before it was made into a television program, a scathing, dark satire that was unapologetic about the ridiculousness of war. Part of that initial cast was Robert Duvall, who played the prim Major Frank Burns with a smoldering anger and a biting edge. The Robert Altman-directed movie from 1970 had a rougher, more chaotic tone with less warmth. It was frank, disrespectful, and incredibly cynical, frequently obfuscating the distinction between cruelty and comedy. In addition to being tense, Duvall was intimidating. Despite not appearing in the movie, Alan Alda subsequently remarked on how the tone had changed. Less human and more cynical, MASH could have been more than satire, in Alda's opinion. He saw it as emotionally complex and multi-layered. He spotted a chance to show compassion as well as humor. To demonstrate that the characters were injured individuals dealing with the tragedy of war behind the sarcasm and rebellion. Alda wanted more than just laughter from the audience. He thought the show's message could be more powerful if it was emotionally honest. Known for his passion and methodical accuracy, Duvall gave the film a more icy sense of realism. It wasn't humorous relief that caused his severe burns. He was despised and represented the brutality and oppression of the military. Some have hypothesized that Duvall's grit and dramatic intensity might not have complemented Alda's more sympathetic, emotionally focused style. Although the two individuals never collaborated directly, their ideologies disagreed. One favors emotional resonance while the other favors stark honesty. Their divergent techniques represented a more significant change in MASH's development, even though they never worked together in production. Alda's purposeful fusion of empathy and humor and Duvall's unvarnished, unadulterated authenticity. It's debatable if that qualifies as a clash, but it's obvious that Alda diverged the series from the tone Duvall represented. Winter, Edward. Edward Winter's portrayal of Colonel Flagg, the paranoid and frequently humorous intelligence officer whose appearances gave MASH a burst of frenetic energy, was an example of art mimicking tension. Flagg was a parody of excessive military action, all bluster, distrust, and strange strategies. And Winter embraced the part with unwavering passion. By balancing hilarious genius with eerie horror, he made Flagg unforgettable. His performance was both ludicrous and unsettling, giving viewers a character that made them both laugh and cringe at the same time. Although there was a lot of energy in their sequences, some have pointed out that Winter's belligerent, aggressive attitude ran counter to Alda's more subtle approach. Winter's theatrical bravado was a stark contrast to Alda's naturalistic portrayal, which emphasized grounded humor and nuanced emotional beats. Their scenes frequently resembled a clash of ideologies, with Hawkeye responding with cool sarcasm, caustic wit, and perplexed restraint, while the Flag stormed in with wild-eyed intensity and crazy conspiracies. On film, the outcome was electrifying. The character's tension was genuine, noticeable, and frequently comical. However, it might have been more difficult to balance that same enthusiasm off-screen. Both actors were complete pros, and there is little evidence of personal hostility. Later on, however, several staff members made hints that rehearsals would be charged, especially during episodes with a lot of flags. Run-throughs apparently felt more like sparring matches than teamwork because of Winter's relentless tempo and high-octane delivery. Winter's raw intensity might have periodically confused Alda's taste for timing, rhythm, and emotional depth. Nevertheless, they managed to make marriage work by transforming their disagreements into dynamic chemistry. It's unclear if the conflict stemmed from two different acting philosophies or from anything more complex. The tension might have been the result of two actors working from different ends of the spectrum, or it might have just been outstanding acting. The latecomer with a wall was David Ogden Stiers. Hawkeye gained a new intellectual opponent with the arrival of David Ogden Stiers as Charles Winchester. Winchester, who took the place of the more naive Frank Burns, was sophisticated, articulate, and frequently a strong opponent to Hawkeye's sarcasm. Audiences reacted favorably to the new energy as their dynamic changed the humor of the show from slapstick to more cerebral. The character was given depth by Stiers, who showed glimmers of weakness beneath the haughtiness. However, Stiers was renowned for being reticent and reserved off-screen. Stiers kept mostly to himself, in contrast to several of the cast members who were more socially close. He stayed out of the spotlight and hardly ever participated in the cast camaraderie that characterized previous seasons. Alda held him in high regard as a serious, contemplative person and as an actor. Although the two men reportedly didn't get along well outside of work, he frequently complimented Stiers on his brilliance and discipline. According to others, Stiers maintained an emotional distance from everyone, even Alda, resulting in a professional but never intimate working relationship. Their on-screen relationship was evident, incisive, nuanced, and frequently moving. Behind the scenes, however, things stayed that way. Larry Linville, work? The man is too straight. The butt of every joke on MASH was Larry Linville's Frank Burns, the insecure, rule-obsessed antithesis of Hawkeye and Trapper's irreverent charm. Linville embraced Burns' absurdity without hesitation, playing the part with perfect timing and dedication. However, he eventually became weary of the character's one-dimensionality. Frank stayed stuck in his timidity and ineptitude, in contrast to other characters who changed. Linville, a classically educated actor with more ambitious goals, became weary of repeatedly portraying the same character. Alda, on the other hand, was flourishing in a role that was always changing. Hawkeye was no longer just the witty surgeon. He was getting deeper, coping with moral complexity, loss, and trauma. The creative spotlight followed Alda more and more as he took on additional behind-the-scenes duties, including writing, directing, and even impacting larger issues. Alda was never disparaged by Linville, but according to others close to the program, he felt creatively constrained and unsupported. After 5 seasons, he made the discreet decision to quit, but the feeling of unbalance persisted. Although Linville wasn't forced out, he wasn't allowed to develop either. Alda had a definite vision and was now writing and directing a lot of episodes. Not everyone could fit inside it either. Masha's earlier, more humorous tone came to an end with Linville's exit, and the program changed to one that was more introspective and focused on its characters. Alda was now in charge of the ship, and Frank Burns and his brand of humor were out of place. Did Alan Alda despise these actors then? Most likely not. There isn't any concrete proof of malicious intent or covert sabotage. However, his career was characterized by standards, ambition, and a readiness to stand up for what he believed in, structurally, artistically, and politically. Even when cloaked in sophistication and charm, that kind of desire leads to conflict. It always has. These were not feuds after all. They were times of human frailty, artistic distance, and detachment. Each of them had their own idea of how to tell a story, but they were all talented individuals attempting to do so. Grudges were never the foundation of Alda's profession. He didn't have to. His art was self-evident. However, he had to deal with partnerships that didn't always work, sometimes in a quiet way and other times in a terrible way, just like any other artist. And perhaps that's what adds to the impressiveness of his legacy. He prospered without losing his soul or openly disparaging others. One of Alda's most distinctive qualities is his ability to remain composed in the face of creative stress in a competitive field where egos collide and storylines are rewritten off camera.